is what the Lord says. When 70 years are completed for Babylon, I will come to you and fulfill my gracious promise to bring you back to this place. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. Then you will call upon me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. I will be found by you, declares the Lord, and will bring you back from captivity. I will gather you from all the nations and places where I have banished you, declares the Lord, and I will bring you back to the place from which I carried you into exile.
Our second reading this morning is from Matthew chapter 7, verses 7 to 12. Ask and you will receive. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened. For everyone who asks receives. He who seeks finds. And to him who knocks the door will be opened. Is there a man among you who will offer his son a stone when he asks for bread, or a snake when he asks for fish? If you then, bad as you are, know how to give your children what is good for them, how much more will your heavenly Father give good things to those who ask him? Always treat others as you would like them to treat you. That is the law of the prophets.
And now I would like to introduce our speaker this morning, Elizabeth Spence, who's going to talk to us about our Seeking the Way, which is our theme for the Guild for this year. And just a little bit more about the Guild, just to remind you all, this being our dedication service, that everyone is welcome to the Guild. We meet on alternate Thursday afternoons at 2, and we have interesting speakers. We visit other guilds, attend things like the Big Sing, send delegates to the annual meeting in Dundee, and fundraise for our projects. And we do have a retiring collection today, you'll be reminded about this later, for our project this year, which is chaplains for our ports. And after a visit from one of a speaker from them, they encouraged us to knit or donate woolly hats for their members. They hand them out to seafarers that they meet in the ports. And we like to support things like that. Our fundraising will have a coffee morning at Easter for that. But now to welcome Elizabeth Spence to talk to us this morning.
Anticipation is everything. Excuse me. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord our God. Amen. It's always good to have a little scream after a prayer, I feel. It's a pleasure for me to be with you this morning to celebrate alongside the Guild as they rededicate themselves to the work and to the aims of the Guild. The Guild, of course, gets a wee bit of a bad press from time to time. It's got a reputation for having formidable, strong women in its midst. In one of my previous churches, we had such a woman, and I don't mind telling you, it was my first church, and I was a wee bit scared of her. It was a bit like a scene from the TV programme Keeping Up Appearances, when Elizabeth is summoned to Hyacinth's bucket aka bouquet's house to take tea. Elizabeth is so nervous that inevitably she just throws the cup and saucer all over herself and tea goes everywhere. Well, that's how that lady made me feel. And one day I was in the church kitchen and I took a cup from the cupboard to get a drink of water, and she came in and just shouted at me, She came from behind, so I didn't hear her coming in, and I got such a fright. Of course, I threw the cup in the air. It smashed onto the stone flooring of the kitchen, smashed to smithereens. You'll know it was a Guild cup. So that was double trauma. However, I survived to tell the tale, and we moved on. I also got a row latterly from taking a drink of water out of a cup and not out of a glass. I learned something there. However, no matter what funny stories we can tell about any group that meets in our churches, I place a high regard on the Guild, because the Guild's a group of people who have a strong friendship and a strong faith. The motto tells you that. There's no question mark in that motto. There's no pondering or wondering. The Guild women and men know what they're about, and they know who they want to do that with. The motto is strong: whose we are and whom we serve. Whose we are? Jesus. Whom we serve? God and God's people. And so it's from that position of strength that the Guild comes to a new 3-year strategy of working and supporting others. One journey, many roads is the overall theme, as you've heard. And this year, they're looking at that in terms of seeking the way. And this will see Guilds across Scotland, as ever, supporting and raising funds for projects that are working in communities in Scotland and overseas. Seeking the way is a phrase that we're well used to hearing as Christian people. Seeking the way, seeking the right direction. You're probably familiar with the story of the Wizard of Oz. Dorothy finds herself in this alien place, swept in by a tornado, and all she needs to do to get home is to reach the wizard. Well, that sounds like it should be an easy task, because there's an enormous yellow road spread out before her. All she has to do is follow that road. She'll get to the wizard, and then she'll be home. But of course, it ends up being quite a scary journey. And she meets all sorts of odd characters as she's going. Firstly, she meets a scarecrow, and she asks for directions, and she gets conflicting advice. He says, go that way. Both arms crossed, go in both directions. Then she meets a tin man who wants a heart, a cowardly lion who needs some courage. They're all looking for something, and they're all looking and hoping they're moving in the right direction to find that something. Of course, it's a story, so there are many distractions along the way, many things to turn them from their goal. But they stick with the yellow brick road no matter what, and then they reach where they want to be. For myself, I often think of my own journey, faith journey, as walking on a hillside. I have to do that from some sort of imagination because I don't walk on hillsides, but I can picture it. I can picture Jesus just walking in front of me, and it's reassuring to know that Jesus is in front of me, showing me the direction, showing me the way. But on occasions, of course, he just moves out of sight as he turns round the hillside. At those points, I can't quite see him. I can't quite see where Jesus has gone. But I have to have faith that if I carry on moving forward, I'll be going in the right direction. I don't want to start taking twists and turns and going off on my own route. I need to seek the way Jesus is travelling and travel that way too. And of course, thankfully, as I round the bend, Jesus appears in front of me again, and once more I can walk with confidence as I seek the way. There are big theological themes to explore when we think about Jesus as the way. The way to what? To God? To heaven? Will others who are not followers of Jesus get there? And if not, why not? But I'm not going to explore those today. As we further think about the Guild theme of seeking the way, I'd like to think about that in terms of following Jesus. The first Christians in Palestine had a title for being a disciple of Jesus, and that was followers of the way. Being a follower of the way meant showing a distinctive way of life. People could see there was something different about these people. They went about life differently, these followers of the way. And some 2,000 years later, people should be looking at us and asking, what's different about us? What's different about these followers of the way in 2018? So what is a distinctive way of living the Christian life? There's a hymn that I particularly like which says, they'll know we're Christians by our love, by our love. They'll know we're Christians by our love. Well, is that so? Do others know we're Christians by our love? Well, if we're trying to seek the way by living the gospel imperative of loving the Lord our God and loving our neighbour as ourselves, then it should be clear that there's something different about us and that we're showing others love. Following Jesus comes in many shapes and sizes. I tried to Google how many Christian denominations there are throughout the world last night on the laptop. It nearly blew up. There are ones, of course, that we know about, the Roman Catholic, Eastern Orthodox, Presbyterian, Baptist, Methodist, and so on. But there are others perhaps we're less familiar with and don't even maybe know about. Quakers and Shakers, Plymouth Brethren, Exclusive Brethren, Indian Brethren, Open Brethren, United Church of God, Living Church of God, Church of the Blessed Hope, and on and on and on it goes. But what brings these churches together is that all of them are seeking the way. They're doing it in a way that's appropriate to how they are and where they are. If you visited to share in worship with some of these churches, it might feel a bit strange. I always encourage people when you're on holiday to go to another church. It can actually be another Presbyterian church. But to go and feel what it feels like again to be in an unfamiliar place in something that should be familiar. My mother-in-law has been a Methodist all her days. But she's now living in a town where there is no Methodist church. So she's been going along to the Baptist church. It has a very different style of worship from what she's used to, and some of it a different theology. But she still found a place in that church. And she still continues to seek the way to love God and to love her neighbour. She now refers to herself as a methylated Baptist. All of these churches are different from each other. However, the distinctive way of living the Christian life is the same. Love the Lord your God and love your neighbour as yourself. And as we seek to follow Jesus, these are what makes us distinctive. It should be obvious to others that we love God, that we love our neighbour. It needs to be in our actions. We need to be finding ways as a church and as individuals to serve those who need us most. The folk that need the food bank, the carer who's looking after somebody 24/7, the person who's living with dementia, the person for whom addiction has a strong hold on their lives, the person who's in the grip of the moneylenders. That's the challenge of seeking the way. It means getting alongside people who are different from us, getting alongside people who we may not like much, and indeed they might not like us much, but it's what we're called to do. We heard a bit of that in the children's address. I didn't know that was going to be the children's address. Who knew? God showed up today and made it all come together. We need to be doing what our words say. An aged old elder told his minister that he was off to pilgrim to the Holy Land. And he said, and when I'm there, I'm going to stand on the shores of the Galilee and I'm going to read Mark 12, love your neighbour as yourself. And it'll be brilliant. And the minister looked at him and said, Sandy, take my advice. Bide at home and just do it. Bide at home and just do it. Don't just read it, do it. Seeking the way leads to action. As the Guild takes on 6 new projects, each Guild will support those projects in their own ways. But the motivation is the same, a desire to love the Lord your God and love your neighbour as yourself. It's this seeking to be the best followers of the way that will help the Sailors Society, which is the project this Guild has, make lives in Malawi, in India, in Scotland better. Last year, £750,000 was raised for those projects in the last 3-year cycle. And I have no doubt that the Guild nationally will raise a similar amount for all the projects. Seeking the way is not always easy. It's not straightforward. We often don't know which path we must take until we reach the path, and perhaps we might not even know then. Often we might feel anxious when we've just lost sight of Jesus on that hillside. There's no map to help us. We don't quite know where we're going. So it's at those times that we need to remind ourselves, even if we can't see Jesus, Jesus is there. His companionship is always with us, to guide us if we choose to listen, to walk with us if we invite him to do so. And some people, as they endeavour to seek the way, do find themselves in dangerous places, where their very lives are threatened because they're seeking the way. You will know, I'm sure, of the missionary Mary Slessor, who went out to Nigeria. She was an exceptional woman, and an exceptional woman of faith, often in danger, often the only white-faced people had seen, and most certainly the first woman they had seen. She lived among the people, she learned their language, respected their traditions, but she was still there to show them God's love and to show her love for them. She had about 5 bouts of malaria and ill health during her time, and she came home to Scotland to recuperate, and each time she went back. She had battles with tribal chiefs. She challenged some of their more barbaric practices as she saw it. She fought with the authorities about where she could go. She went on dangerous missions into isolated areas. In 1909, the High Commissioner of Nigeria said, "Miss Slessor can go anywhere no white man can go. She can sway the people when we cannot sway them." And she did all this. She put herself through all of this because she wanted to put into action seeking the way, being the best follower of Jesus she knew how to be. When life was difficult, and sometimes when she was in fear for her life, the words from Jeremiah sustained her. "For I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you, not to harm you, plans to give you hope and to give you a future." And as we seek the way, as we follow Jesus where he leads, these words are for us too. God has a plan for us. God will not harm us. God has a future for us. When we are seeking the way, when we are trying to be the best follower we can possibly be, we also have to make sure we're seeking the way that we know would be pleasing to God. In the passage of time, God won't ask us what kind of car you drove. God will ask us, how many people did you give a lift to? God won't ask us, how big is your house? God will say, how many folks did you invite into your house? God won't ask us how many friends we had. God will ask us, how many people were you a friend to? God won't ask what kind of neighbourhood we lived in. God will ask us, were you a good neighbour? Seeking the way means loving God and seeking God's will for our lives. It means loving our neighbour as we would want to be loved and treated. So as the Guild begins another year of fun and friendship, another year of seeking the way and following Jesus, we can all commit ourselves to following Jesus and seeking the way in our lives and in our communities, knowing that when the journey gets tough, when we get weary, we have a God who has a plan for us and gives us a hope and gives us a future. Amen. Your offering will now be received.